There can be help added in the second round, but do the Bucks have a spotty track record at best? Camille and I take a look down that path and what to expect with that number 47 pick in this summer's draft coming up next on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined as always by Camille Davis. You can find me on the Bucks Radio Network. You can catch Camille on the Locked On NBA channel and the Technical Foul podcast. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Well, we talked about the free agency from a year ago and the impact that those players made. We have made it very clear the priorities for the players you need to retain this summer. And that brings us to the third leg here, Camille, and that is the upcoming draft, which is now, 4 weeks away, I believe, from today. So the Bucks do not hold the first round pick. And I would say, at least for the time being, get used to that feeling. Their only pick in this draft is number 47 in the second round. And you and I were kind of going back and forth over like, well, what about this guy? And we're not going to pretend to be Sam Vecini and college basketball experts. It's just people that I saw a couple of games that this guy played in. But it is much more challenging to try to see what is going to be there in the second round versus you're just locked in on a lottery pick. We've seen and heard a few names that have worked out for the Bucks. But I think it's no surprise the guys that have worked out are guys that do one thing really well, have some flaws, or maybe even the consensus, it might be an undrafted player that you could sign. That's kind of where you have to set your sights with number 47 at the midpoint of the second round. So all of this is to say, it's not like in the past when we would just heavily discard second round picks and, well, it's a second rounder. Nothing's going to come from that. Because we've seen the Bucks get some value from the second round. We've seen other teams get value from second round picks. But I think the purpose of this is to realistically level set. Mm-hmm. What type of player, not like how does he play, but what are the expectations in terms of rotational piece? How many minutes, how many games, what can you lean on? What do you expect there with the second round pick?
Yeah, I think that the Bucks draft strategy this year will be a little bit different than last year's, where they took some guys who are more developmental pieces of like, hey, we see some traits in you, and we were fine with waiting, a couple of years to see how that develops. And we've talked already about how this upcoming year for Tyler Smith, for us, is like, we want to see what that progress looks like for him. But for the Bucks, when you're picking 47th in the second round, it's not like it's an early second round pick or anything like that. Like, it's almost towards the end there of that second round. So, and based on who we've seen the Bucks bring into with the draft workout trackers and everything like that, looks like they're looking at upperclassmen. And that makes a lot of sense to me for the Bucks in this particular position. We've talked about the ramifications that the CBA has been having on NBA teams and team building. And I think this year, I think that's going to be the thing I'm looking for. So like I've started my draft prep about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and just kind of getting all the prospects' names together. Start at the top of the draft. I haven't even gotten all the way down to some of the prospects that the Bucks could have on the table for them at that point. But I think it has to be an older player this year, someone who might have a chance to be able to come in and get some playing time right away. Not saying like someone's going to come in and be a second round draft pick that 47, and he's going to be playing, 25, 30 minutes a night, but just somebody who could kind of come in and get 5 minutes or so, maybe 10 minutes in a regular season, soak that up and see what that looks like for him. So for me, when I'm thinking of what I'm expecting from the Bucks this year, I think I'm expecting an older player rather than a younger prospect who you can kind of take a shot on.
I don't really know what to expect. And I think I don't want to read too much into it, but if you're looking at upperclassmen and that type, that to me sends the message of our belief is not much is going to change, that our superstar is not asking to be traded. We think him sticking around here, the fact that Dame is still under contract, probably won't play next year, that's going to lead to guys like Gary Trent and Kevin Porter and Jericho Sims, wanting to be here. Bobby Portis as well. So we think we're going to keep most, if not all, of that group together. That was the group we leaned on down the stretch late in the season. And let's try to find a guy that can start to find some type of a role in a niche with this team. I think last year I definitely would have said that's the approach you have to take. And it's funny, the Bucks took the exact opposite. A.J. Johnson, and then you're basically your fake first round pick is that deal from the Dame deal, right? Or no, that was a different deal. But you had Portland's second round pick, and you use that to take Tyler Smith, who we both said, look, that's another guy we can't sleep on when we say who needs to take a step forward, especially, as things change and whether or not Brook Lopez is retained, whether or not Bobby Portis leaves, there might be a big opportunity for him next season. But the Bucks took the opposite approach last season, and we can criticize, why would you take A.J. Johnson and not a guy that was ready to develop now or contribute now? I mean, I'm definitely willing to listen to that, but also let's remove the on-court performance. That trade with the Wizards doesn't happen if you don't take an A.J. Johnson type. If you have an older, more upperclassman and not a quote-unquote lottery ticket, I don't think the Wizards are interested because they wanted multiple first-round picks in that deal. We can laugh at it now with the way that it kind of fit together, but again, the importance of it may not have worked out on the court last season. Maybe it does this year, but more importantly, it got you under the second apron, so it wasn't just, okay, Dame's injured, Dame's probably out for a year, we're really screwed because all we can do is vet minimums and 120% raise to a Gary Trent Jr. opposed to we can break up the non-taxpayer and some other things. So, it is funny that that's the exact opposite approach that the Bucks took a year ago. Just for where we are, though, I think that's the interesting part of the discussion is if we're going to assume you got Giannis, and I think that's the assumption we all want to take. If we're going to assume Giannis is still around, how should you use that? Should it be a developmental piece similar to Tyler Smith and A.J. Johnson from a year ago? Should it be somebody that can step in and contribute immediately? And, when we mentioned at the top, the draft is different now. It's not like in the past when you'd say second-round picks are worthless because of some of the names that we've seen come out, especially in these last three drafts, some real value in the second round. So we'll run through some of those picks and try to grapple with that discussion of what's the best setting here for the Bucks coming up after the break here. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. What would it look like to combine live prop bets mid-game based on how the action unfolds? Well, if you've got a read on who's heating up, why not back it up with a same-game parlay? How could $200 in bonus bets being added to your account add to the excitement if your first $5 bet hits? If you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. So again, Bucks have the 47th pick this upcoming draft here. And just to take a quick trip down memory lane.
Oh boy.
I think we would have to start with 2017, although I would apply a pretty sizable asterisk to that because that was John Horst's first draft. But if memory serves, I know John Horst was named the GM in mid-June or so. So it was about a week before the draft that John Horst got that job. Now, he was a part of the front office, so certainly was part of some of the scouting and had some input. But that's when I still struggle with saying this was John Horst
First
select.
draft. Yeah.
Yeah, but nonetheless, 2017, the first draft the Bucks had with John Horst as a GM, their first round pick was DJ Wilson at number 17. Their second round pick, do you remember who this was?
He was traded to the Clippers, right? I can't remember his I can't remember his name, but I remember it was a trade to the Clippers.
Yeah. Sindarius Thornwell out of South Carolina. Then it gets interesting. So 2018, no second round pick, only a first. They were drafting 17 again. And in what I would deem the first true John Horst draft, you got, I don't think it's even arguably, at least as of right now, you got the best value that you've seen in about a decade here in Dante DiVincenzo at number 17. Now, Dante, the version that he is now, the more polished and finished product, that's not necessarily what you had, but you could see there was something there. So Dante DiVincenzo in 2018, 2019, he's on the team right now. It comes full circle. Kevin Porter Jr. was technically your draft pick, but he was traded to the Pistons and then to the Cavaliers, and that was the John Lure Tony Snell trade, I believe. Okay. 2020, you had a first and second round pick in the COVID draft. First rounder you didn't keep. It was RJ Hampton that was traded to the Nuggets. Second round pick, you got Jordan Nwora. And then Sam Merrill was a part of a different trade that came over. So you got Sam Merrill, who is showing some value now. In 2021, only one pick in name, and that was Isaiah Todd. But that, again, part of a trade. That was a second round pick. 2022, you had a first rounder late. That was, of course, Marjan Beauchamp, who we all had high hopes for. Didn't pan out. And that brings us to 2023, a second round pick, pretty close to where it is now, but it was the last pick in the draft. And that, of course, was Chris Livingston. Some of us still own a property on that island. And
I know you do.
Last year, AJ Johnson and Tyler Smith, the two selections. So we run through those names, Camille. It doesn't inspire a whole lot of confidence. And, you know, we're talking about Sam Merrill not listed in there. You had Sam Merrill. You saw, I think maybe there's something here, kind of early stages, AJ Green, but it didn't really develop in Milwaukee. Dante DiVincenzo, the one that did. And I think we have some moderate hopes for Tyler Smith. But when you ask, how do you get into this spot where you talk about an aging roster and the injuries and everything else, I submit to you the draft history from 2017 onward.
Yeah, when one, you don't have many draft picks to begin with, and two, you're not hitting on the draft picks that you do get consistently. Yeah, that's how you get to an aging roster that's really vet heavy as well. But luckily for the Bucks, I feel like they have had a little bit more success with the two-way guys than they have with their draft picks. So that's been their saving grace, so to speak, when it comes to getting some more young talent on the roster primarily. But yeah, when you look at the history so far, it doesn't necessarily inspire much confidence, which is why I understand when Bucks fans are like, the draft, go ahead, trade the picks. Like, because what are we going to do with them? But now the Bucks are in a spot here where, again, the draft picks are becoming very, very valuable. And we know as the draft goes on, your likelihood of being able to find somebody who hits decreases just mathematically because it's harder to find those gems in the second round. It takes a lot to figure that out. I mean, like before Horst, I remember this clearly of like the Bucks drafting Norm Powell back in 2015 and trading him immediately for a trade that I don't even want to discuss anymore for Bucks fans. But yeah, we got a comment that just came through saying the Bucks are a free agency gold miner, and that's been where they've been developing their talent. But for this year's draft, 2025, in a year where there's so many questions around what Giannis' future is, and we've talked about it on this show of we think the path forward for the Bucks is younger, depth, and, you know, building it around Giannis in that way. But let me ask you this. When looking at the overall picture for what the Bucks have done, are you someone who subscribes to the notion of, like, you're making picks 47? Does positional need come into play for you? So, like, no. I think of, like, how the Packers draft, which NFL drafts are far different than NBA drafts. But, like, the Packers have what they call the Packer way. They have certain qualifications they look for at every position group. They don't draft outside of it. They set themselves like parameters of, if we can operate within these parameters, we feel we have a higher likelihood of drafting someone who's going to hit, because we know based on history, this works, this works, this works, not by positional need, but just by what our board says. So for you thinking of NBA basketball and for the Bucks here, are you someone who looks at the roster and says like, hey, we're going to be kind of short on bigs if we have no Brook Lopez, like we should prioritize getting the big a little bit more than if there's a really good guard that's available? So like, how do you tend to like approach your draft analysis? You're like, nah.
No, I don't think you can do that in the second round, especially once you get into the mid and late parts of the second round. Like if the best guy is out there, take him. And again, we're comparing best for that point to early in the draft, but like for your positional needs, if it's close enough, sign that guy as an undrafted free agent, as you see a lot of those guys start to slip through. So I don't fall into that trap. I think if you're drafting at that point in the second round, and if you're a bad team too, like even if you're in the lottery and we already got a point guard, but this guy's clearly the best player in the draft. If you're a bad team, take that guy, because you can figure out the surplus later, and that can lead to other assets for you. Like you can't fall victim to, we got to find the right positional fit here for this group. This first rounder is gone. That is a part of the Drew Holiday trade. So the Pelicans have this one. And, looking through what the Bucks have on the horizon here. First rounder goes to New Orleans. Your second round pick, and I can't remember which deal this was, but your second rounder goes to the Pistons. So this first round pick that you have, or second round pick that you have, isn't actually yours. And it's better than the one that you're shipping out to Detroit. Next year, the Pelicans hold the rights to a pick swap for you. So once you get to next year, Camille, you're 3/4 of the way done with that Drew Holiday trade. So I think it's imperative, since we don't know what the future is going to hold for Milwaukee this season. Let's just hope the Pelicans are bad. So it gets to the point of, those pick swaps went unused, and the Pelicans got those 2 first-round picks from you. 2027, so 2 years from now, an unprotected first goes to New Orleans, and then the Drew Holiday trade is done. Now, the other parts of it, next year, your second-round pick goes to the Utah Jazz, and that is 31 through 55 protected. So in other words, if you're one of the 4 best teams in the league, you keep the pick. If you are the worst team in the league, you don't keep your pick. So it's just, if you're one of the 4 best teams in the league, you get to keep your second round pick, and then it just goes on down the road and turns into multiples. That brings us to, once you get through 2027, the Holiday trade is done. Then there's just 2 more assets left to pay the Blazers for Damian Lillard. So 2028, Portland has a pick swap. It is protected 15 through 30. That right there puts the impetus on, look, if you stick around here and we lean into these young guys and we keep building and developing some of these guys, we can keep that first round pick. Now, granted, it just keeps moving down the road and eventually turns into, I believe, 3 or 4 second round picks. But, if we can finish somewhere around middle of the pack, we keep that first round pick. So that's another thing to lean into. And then 2030, the Blazers have the right to the pick swap. Then you're free and clear. So you're, what will we say, about a third of the way through, halfway through this treacherous journey that the Bucks have been on with their future assets. But the point is, okay, you've started to make some payments. You're paying down the balance. Now let's start to work on the interest and get through this and see the light at the end of the tunnel. I mentioned there has been a fairly decent amount of value to come out of second round picks in recent years. So we'll explore some of those names, some names you may have even forgot about in these last 3 drafts that teams are finding in the second round. And again, we're talking 2-3 years ago. So quickly developing, or at least within a year, you're getting that type of impact. We'll open up that discussion next on Locked On Bucks. So I'm I mean, we could go back a ways here and, who are the best second round picks ever? Did you know Nikola Jokic was a second round pick? But if we just look at, let's say, the last 3 years and focus on, here's the type of timeline. If we're looking at a quote unquote gap year this year, okay, so 1 year later, maybe you start to get a big rotational piece that this guy can develop into. So dating back to the 2022 draft, here's some names that came out of the second round, Camille. So in 2022, a very prominent player that is still playing right now, Andrew Nembhard, was the 31 pick, first pick of the second round for the Indiana Pacers in 2022. Caleb Houston's been a rotational piece for the Orlando Magic. I mean, I think that's the type of guy you would look to say, can we get this type at 47? Or Jalen Williams, not J-Dub, but Jay Will out of Arkansas was the number 34 pick in the second round that year. And again, rotational depth for a big. Jaden Hardy was a second round pick that season. Ryan Rollins was the number 44 pick in that draft. Vince Williams showed some flashes with the Grizzlies. He was a second round pick. So the point is, you can get some guys there that you're starting to see. Caleb Houston, Andrew Nembhard, Jalen Williams, Max Christie was in there as well at 35. So already you're starting to see, okay, I mean, it's not best player on the team, but you see pieces that work. 2023 in the second round. Andre Jackson Jr., number 36, taken by the Magic and traded to the Bucks. Muhammad Gay was a second round pick for the Hornets and eventually traded to the Atlanta Hawks. So not quite as much this season here, but Jalen Wilson of the Nets, rotational piece that you're seeing there. Trace Jackson Davis, and of course our guy Chris Livingston. But last year, second round picks. Tyler Smith, right? Tyler Kolek showed some flashes. Granted, didn't play. And funny, I don't see the same complaints about Tom Thibodeau not playing the young guys that we hear all the time about Doc Rivers and Bud. AJ Mitchell, who showed a lot of flashes with the Thunder when they did play him. Jalen Wells, who was on pace to be an even bigger breakout candidates. So Iguodala was a second round pick. Pella Larson, the Heat eventually put into the starting lineup. Jamal Shedd, Cam Christie. So you're starting to see more and more names. Quentin Post was a second round pick. These past few years, you're seeing those guys that, again, realistically, to level set, you are very likely not getting a starting caliber player in the second round. Now, when you mention the type of player and the upperclassmen, veteran, collegiate guys, it does harken memories to Malcolm Brogdon, who you got in the second round and won Rookie of the Year and was available to step in and contribute immediately. So maybe you can find that type of player, but I think the point of this exercise was to show, look, second rounders have value. And if it's not an immediate, this guy's a piece of the rotation contributor here, you at least see some flashes. Granted, it wasn't a ton, but I think we saw flashes last year with Tyler Smith, where, he's got an NBA shot. He's got a knack for being around the ball. Let's see what can continue to develop. And that's what's going to be big in year two. And I think that's what you look for here in this second round pick is, maybe things break where there's an injury or something else where we like a matchup and this guy ends up playing a handful of games for us. We like what we see. And then in year two, he's on that Andrew Nembhard trajectory where it's, wow, this guy really exploded.
Yeah. And I think one thing to keep in mind too, when discussing the draft and prospects and things of that sort, basketball is all about progression. Generally the player that you are when you step foot into the league is not the player you're going to be in 2, 3, 5 years. You continue to develop your game. You continue to add to it. Again, everyone doesn't make it to 5 years in the NBA at that. But I think when talking through prospects and drafting, and at some point we should definitely try to get Rafael Barlow on the NBA or Locked On Big Board, our draft expert here on the network. But he pointed out this as well of when having conversations about guys and weaknesses and strengths and whatnot, it can always change. These are very young players still. We really don't know. We're trying to make projections on what they can be. And that's one way I always look at it. And to your point about what Malcolm Brogdon was able to do when he came in, what the reaction even last year of the draft pick that the Bucks made of wait, we did what? With who? Because even me, I was like, I think Bucks fans last year would have had a different reaction if Tyler Smith was the first round pick and AJ Johnson was that second round pick. But again, it's just the way that it works. Like, these are very young players still that can be molded into a few different ways. And just really quick, I mentioned it on the show yesterday that I was heading to a draft workout with the Bucks, and it was very hush hush in the sense of what we could talk, and we couldn't walk out with things, couldn't have our phones out. But one thing that I will say from the workouts, the experience itself was really cool, just to be able to sit above the practice gym and watch guys just get to it. You could see the workout area in the distance. So you were seeing players on the team coming in, watching some of the draft workouts along the way. Andre Jackson Jr. was there. A lot of the younger players were there. Tyler Smith was there. Some of the two-way guys.
Well, because as we mentioned too, the younger players are really the only ones that are on the team going forward.
Very true. So yeah, just seeing them come and work out, like, it was a really cool experience. And I'm not sure if I can mention the names of who was there, but they were all seniors, is what I will say. Every single player that I saw there yesterday was a senior working out, which again made me think, like, I think the Bucks are trying to go in a direction a little bit different than what they did last year. And who knows, that could have just been that particular workout. But even when you check a website like Hoopsite that kind of tracks what they have heard about players coming in, when you look at the list, there is one sophomore, one junior, and like 8 seniors that have been reported to work out with the Bucks so far this year. So I think that might be the direction that they go in this year. But again, we won't really know until June 26th, I believe, is the second day of the draft, now that it's 2 days instead of 1. But I think it might be an older prospect for the reasons that we've already discussed on this episode, of like just what you can expect out of an older player rather than a younger one.
Yeah, and the first name that we saw pop up, I'm not going to put you on the spot since you can't answer and ask if this person was there yesterday, but the first name that we saw pop up of he worked out for the Bucks was Mark Sears, who is certainly a terrific shooter, smaller point guard, but a senior and one of those upperclassmen. So maybe that is where the Bucks are leaning, and that we feel like we're keeping most of this group together. Who can step in and help us immediately, because of the fact that, as we just went through, the dearth of assets that you have in terms of draft picks from now until 2030, who can we get that immediate contribution from that will maybe help offset the absence of some of those looming selections? I do believe we are tentatively scheduled to tape something with Frank tonight that would run tomorrow, possibly Monday as well. Frank had a very interesting night last night. If anybody has seen some of the flooding going on in the Austin area, that's what Frank was dealing with. So our thoughts to him. He said he's all good, and they were able to avoid anything, but certainly a hectic, chaotic night for the Madden family household last night. And anybody that is a Spectrum subscriber, I'm going to be on the roundtable with Dennis Krause. I believe Jim Paschke is going to be on with us as well later on today. So that'll air today and tonight. So look for that as well. But it's a much different feeling going into the draft this season. That is definitely for sure. Speaking of the draft, make sure you're making some time to check out that show that Camille mentioned, the Locked On NBA Big Board Show. Draft expert Rafael Barlow reacts to every workout, interview, and rumor leading up to the NBA draft. You can find Locked On NBA Big Board on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. That'll do it for today's show. For Camille, I'm Justin. We'll talk with you guys once again tomorrow on Locked On Bucks.